So you want to make beer the easiest possible way, maybe even call yourself a brewer somewhat. This is the easiest way to do it. Basically a wort in a box kit. In this case, it's just wort in a box. There's 23 liters of wort in there. Comes with the instructions, comes with yeast. And all you really got to do is pour it in a bucket, throw the yeast in, and Bob's your uncle. Well, you gotta put the lid on it and the airlock. And then maybe check your specific gravity if you want afterwards or before, or both, because you need to check both before and after to get it done. But anyway, easiest possible way to do it, doesn't take much time, and you can enjoy a beer while you're doing it because you're not gonna have enough time to get tipsy if you keep drinking, because this whole process only takes a few minutes. Anyway, let's check it out.
Party time, party time, party time brews. This one is for beginners, you can watch it if you choose. Party time, party time, party time brews. Fresh Wort Kits are so easy, make a beer then take a snooze. There are pretty much three main levels of home brewing. I call the first level the wort in a box or bag method, but it's more commonly known as using a fresh wort kit. Level 2 is the partial mash, and finally the holy grail of home brewing, the all grain method. Most of the Party Time Brewing videos focus on the all grain method, but if you're thinking about getting into brewing or want to try it out in the most easy way possible, I recommend giving the fresh wort kit a try.
Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is make sure everything's clean. Cleanliness is the only thing you really gotta focus on for this whole process, because wort in a box is a real easy way to go. So first thing you do, I just already got this, you might already know how to clean a bucket. I cleaned a bucket. So after that, all it was taking some of your star sand, which is this stuff right here. If you're just starting out, I recommend getting a much smaller package of it, because that big one's probably about 35 bucks, where you only need small to start, and then you can see if you like the hobby. But for now, I got that, mixed about half of a bucket, this is a Home Depot bucket, so only about half an ounce of the star sand, and it makes a nice sanitizing solution. And I'm just gonna dump it in my bucket to clean. Like I said, I already scrubbed out the bucket. Really not much to do there, other than you wanna make sure that star sand gets good contact with everything. So what I'm doing here is just dumping out, sending it through the valve there, or the spigot. Good enough for me. I already cleaned it out once. This one's for video. Give it a little shake around, and make sure you kind of twist the bucket as you're dumping to get as much possible star sand over all the surface. Well, you want it over all the surface. And one of the big things, at least with star sand, is the beauty is you don't need to worry about rinsing it, drying it, or anything. There may be a little bit of foam in there, but she's good to go. Okay, so that's all sanitized. The next thing we gotta do is let's have a peek and see what's in the box. So there seems to be no real classy way to do this. Some wine kits have a little punch out in the box, so you can pull this top piece through and pour nice and easily. These boxes don't, so I find the easiest way is to just tear the box down. And that's especially since the instructions and everything are on the bottom, so you don't actually see those at the top. So you really do have to open this whole box and get the wort out of there. Too easy. So we open this up, it has your instructions, and also some S23 Saflager yeast, which is, in case you're wondering, ideally 12 to 15 degrees Celsius fermenting, but it's also good from 9 to 22 degrees. There are lots of experiments that show, as long as it's within the range, it's pretty good, but ideally 12 to 15 degrees Celsius. Really, unless you have a fermentation chamber or a fridge you can temperature control, you're probably not going to get that 12 to 15 degrees Celsius. So for me, I just plan on putting it in a closet under my stairs, and that gives me about 18 degrees Celsius for the fermentation. But anyway, we know that's a good yeast. That can just be sprinkled right on top of the wort when she's in the bag. And here are the instructions. Use wort at room temperature. Remove the bag of wort and yeast sachets from the box. Tubing, clamp, airlock, and rubber bung. Siphon the beer into the glass carbo. You know what? Up that. You do not need to use a secondary fermentation. You're going to use one bucket and that's it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to dump the wort in the bucket, and sprinkle some yeast on top. It said that you can go to 25 degrees. I don't recommend going to 25 degrees. It says the yeast is best at 22 degrees or only good up until 22 degrees. So I recommend finding the coldest spot in your house and putting it there. I doubt you have too many spots that are 10 to 12 degrees, unless you're winter in Canada, which I guess we're coming up on, so I might have been straight up wrong on that one. Anyway, I'm gonna try to dump this wort in the bag, this bag of wort, into the bucket, and we want to splash as much as possible, so I'm just gonna move to the floor to do that. Let's bring our bucket down. Okay, this one's a little bit optional, but you may have, it's nice to buy a $3 Dollarama spray bottle and make a mixture of Star San. Keep it away from the children because they tend to like to spray their face with it. And make sure you just give it a little sanitization. Spray that. Sanitize your hands. Ideally, you'll be wearing gloves. Somewhat sanitized. And see if we can do this reasonably classily.
At this point, you want to use your skills and dump from as high as possible. The higher you dump, the more oxygen gets in the wort and the happier the yeast will be. Yeast like oxygen at the start of fermentation. Once fermentation's over, it doesn't need oxygen and the oxygen will mess up your beer.
And we can lift it right back up onto the table, finish off our magic. So we got one last little step before we're done, and that is take the yeast packet, give it a little sanitization. Normally we'd sanitize your scissors so we can cut this, but there's really only one safe way to do it. That wasn't classy. And then you just sprinkle the yeast in.
In this case here, I sprinkled the yeast all over the top of the foam, taking my time to try to get it all. If I didn't knock the foam down, it might stick to the top of the lid and make some of the yeast useless.
Now your yeast is in. You got the already pre-sanitized top to your bucket. The only thing I'd say about these buckets is I bought one that had a pre-hole drilled in it. I'd probably recommend drilling the hole on the side of it if you had to drill it yourself, because here the pre-drill, any water that goes on top, it'll funnel down into that spot, where if it's not in that spot right there, if the bung was here, if it filled up, you'd probably be able to wipe it down a little easier before you pull the bung out. So maybe not that important, but might help. At this point, if you want, you can give it a little bit of a shake, but I'm not going to because the yeast is still sitting on the foam, and I think if I give it a shake, it will all just kind of mash to the top of the fermenter, and you might just lose a little bit of the useful yeast there, but I mean, it's all gonna get mixed up. There's enough yeast in there to do fine for here. So we got that on. That is sealed up, and we're basically just gonna not touch this for about 7 days, or at least until you see the activity in the airlock stop for 2 to 3 days. If you have a turkey baster or something, you could, if you had to, you could take a sample from the top. Since we got a spigot here, that's totally optional. And I have my hydrometer here. We're just gonna take a hydrometer measurement on this. Give it a little check here. Little checky wecky. Foam at the top doesn't help there. Okay, let's see. So she is starting out at 1.044. So we'll take the number now, we'll take the number at the end, and the difference will tell you how much sugar the yeast ate, and therefore how much alcohol you have. And it also, this time, it's not bad to always taste your wort, see what it tastes like. Then you might eventually get better at tasting wort and have a good idea if you're gonna make a good beer with it, who knows? It's just sugary, not super hoppy at all, but it's also a blonde, so I wouldn't expect it super hoppy. And then once you're done with this, this is a actually bad purchase to get because this is a 200 milliliter
Graduated cylinder.
100 milliliter one is way better because you don't waste as much beer. You only waste half as much when you're taking a measurement. Anyway, cheers. It's bottle time. For bottling, if you think you're gonna stay in it, I recommend getting the cleaning kind of set up. You can get a quick attachment for your tap here for a few bucks. I don't know what they cost anymore, maybe 20 bucks. The number's right here. And the other setup thing you can get is, this is kind of a partial piece of it, but it's a bottle washer. You basically put it in the water, then you go up and down, and it will fire by just doing that motion there with the bottle. It will fire water up into it, and not really water, just cleaner. So show you that in a second. Cleaner you're gonna probably get with everything is some sort of Chloriclean, kind of pinkish. More or less just makes a chlorine kind of bleach. So I'm gonna read the instructions and measure out precisely what you're gonna put in there to sanitize.
Now you'll have to pump the rinser a few times to get the sanitizer flowing. Make sure you have 3 or 4 good blasts of sanitizer to ensure full coverage on the bottle, and then set it aside for the next one. Do this with all 60 or so bottles that you'll need for the 23-liter kit. Now that it's full of sanitizer, we'll need to rinse it out. Whenever using this type of sanitizer that requires rinsing, you usually want to triple rinse it. This ensures all the sanitizer is gone and you won't get any flavors from that delicious chlorine.
Now again, you don't need any of those items for cleaning, but they really make your life a lot easier, especially if you're going to do a bunch of bottles. Another thing that you want to remember when you're cleaning bottles, or not even when you're cleaning bottles, but when you're drinking your beer, is that you should be pissed at people if they don't rinse their beer when you're done. Or at least make sure you're running around rinsing the bottles out if you plan on reusing them. Bottles are a bitch to clean if they have everything kind of crusted up and dry in there, especially if you're doing the home brew and you may have a little bit more yeast sediment at the bottom than you'd normally have with a commercial beer. So make sure you rinse all your bottles out, and then when cleaning day comes, it's really just a matter of a quick clean with the Chloriclean, and then rinse it out and you're good as gold. Today my arsenal features 2 caps.
Well, clean them then.
Caps are clean. Let's get to capping. For capping, I have one of these. Haven't used it in a while, but I'm going to use it today. These are a lot easier than the kind of handheld one that you can crank down. If you're going to do a bunch of beer, I recommend one of these. If you're not going to do a bunch of beer, maybe only thinking about the one batch, you can rent one of these from your store, usually pretty cheap, or you can just get a handheld one that's a little bit cheaper. And the final thing we want to do, we got our bottles ready, we got our caps kind of clean. We'll make sure we rinse them before we put them on the bottles. Final thing you want to do is make a solution so that you can carbonate your beer. So I used the magic box here to find out exactly how much priming sugar I need for my beer. What I found out is that it needs approximately 3/4 of a cup for a full batch of beer of the priming sugar, which is 113 grams, and that boils down to approximately 5 grams per liter. So I'm going to use that, base it on what I got here. I have a 500 milliliters, so 2.5, and a 500 milliliters. So I will use 10 grams of priming sugar, mix it in with a little tiny solution of water and hot water. You want boiled water just to absorb it in, and then dump it in those beers as you're bottling them, and you should be good to go. So yeah, we put a little bit too much sugar on there. It ended up being about 6 grams. I don't want to put that much in, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of some of it. So we got rid of the extra gram of the sugar, and now it's time to just mix it in our solution. Doesn't matter if it's super precise. I'm not being super precise. So now, get her in there. I'm just mixing it up a bit. And now we got some priming sugar, so that should go in the bottles, and that'll just ferment it just enough to give that little extra bit of carbonation, or that carbonation. It'll give us the carbonation. Here on this little white area is exactly where it'll show you how much carbonation you should expect. Again, you can take a look, you can find a carbonation chart online to see exactly how much you'll need. Okay, so we got the priming sugar in here. Now it's just a matter of putting some beer in the bottles. Put this in there, and then we just want to bottle. And you just want to run it till it's about full. I'm probably going to overflow this a bit.
In this case, I have a spigot on my bucket. They can be picked up for under 10 bucks, but if you don't have a spigot, you'll need a bottle filler as seen here. These fillers are about 5 bucks and just attached to your hose for siphoning. The stopper at the bottom will open when pressed against the bottom of the bottle and close when lifted. You just fill the bottle to the top, and when you remove the wand, the headspace should be pretty close to perfect. Now you're gonna cap. The cappers are pretty straightforward and might take you a few tries, but eventually you'll figure it out. Just ensure the capper is fully extended when you rest it against the bottle, and then close the arm or arms to cap the bottle, making sure you're nice and straight above the bottle. Be careful, glass breaks and bottles are slippery when wet.
So now we got 2 cap bottles that I didn't even bother taking the label off of, so hopefully I'll remember what they are, but for now we just want to put them in a dark place and let them condition for the next 10 days or so. Correct me if I'm wrong, text.
Wrong. Try 2 to 4 weeks for best results.
Okay. Next step, giving these bad boys a taste. So it's been about 5 weeks since I bottled the beer. Let's see if it carbonated. Right off the bat, before I even start, I haven't opened it yet, and I'll let you know, I accidentally stored it on its side, so some of the sediment was kind of resting on the side of it. So a tip, when you put your bottles away to condition or to ferment to get the carbonation, make sure you stand them right up so all the sediment goes to the bottom. When I pour this, it'll probably be a little bit more murky than it normally would be, but it's not gonna hurt anyone and it should taste the same. Also made another mistake, and that was I kind of bottled it and then put it in an area that was fairly cold, so it was only about 14 degrees Celsius, which is something in Fahrenheit, and I'm not sure how it's gonna carb. Let's find out. Here's the bottle. If this one fails, I will put the other one in a warm place for another week or so and try it again, but here goes nothing. A little bit of carbonation popping out the top. As you can see, a little bit of head that formed there, so that's a good start. Have a little sniffy whiffy. It smells like beer. We've made beer. It's that easy. Loud noises. So what you usually want to do is pour it in a glass when you're doing homebrew. There's always usually sediment at the bottom, especially if you're bottle conditioning, so pour it in a glass and leave a little bit at the end so you don't have this murky mess, unless you don't care about the murky mess and just want to drink your beer. Then feel free to dump the whole bottle, or just drink from the bottle, but we'll be classy. Yeah, that seems carbonated well. Again, this was a blonde. It's been a long time since I bottle conditioned beer, and that looks pretty good to me. It's not perfectly clear, but it doesn't matter. Everyone loves hazies these days anyway. Let's have a proper whiff. Be careful not to get it in your mustache. Smells beery. Let's go.
And as I take time to take a sip here, I'll let you know that the beer started out at 1.044, ended at 1.006 for a 4.99% alcohol by volume.
It's carbonated well. It's a blonde.
It was actually a bit over-carbonated.
Probably shouldn't have just eaten chocolate before this, because that's kind of what I'm getting. And a little bit dull flavor, but doesn't matter. You made beer. There's alcohol in this, and it's carbonated. So it even looks like beer. Whether or not it's a plain tasting beer, who knows? But again, it was a blonde, so you're not going to be expecting any crazy flavors in there unless you maybe went nuts and dry hopped it, but that's for a different time. We made beer!
Take a look at the comments below for a full list of essential and optional supplies. Homebrew stores tend to have sales on starter kits that may be just as cheap as buying the essentials and include a few more things. Currently, our local store, Noble Grape, has starter kits that include the same brew as I did here for just about $100.
Mustache.